Chapter 2. Wearing his new tie, and the better of his two suits, Quillerin set forth with some apprehension for his first visit to a decorating studio, bracing himself for an overdose of the precious and the esoteric. He found the firm of Like and Starkweather in an exclusive shopping area, surrounded by specialty shops, art galleries, and tea rooms. The entrance was impressive. Huge double doors of exotically grained wood had silver door handles as big as baseball bats. The interior displayed furniture in room settings, and Quillerin was pleased to find one room wallpapered in a red plaid that matched his tie. Moose antlers were mounted above a fireplace made of worm-eaten driftwood, and there was a sofa covered in distressed pigskin, like the hides of retired footballs. A slender young man approached him, and the newsman asked to see Mr. Like or Mr. Starkweather. After a delay that seemed inauspicious, a gray-haired man appeared from behind an oriental screen at the rear of the shop. He had a bland appearance and a bland manner. "Mr. Like is the one you should talk to, if it's about publicity," he told Quillerin. "But he's busy with a client. Why don't you just look around while you're waiting?" "Are you Mr. Starkweather?" Quillerin asked. "Yes, but I think you should talk to Mr. Like. He's the one." "I'd appreciate it if you'd tell me about these displays while I'm waiting." Quillerin motioned toward the moose antlers. "There isn't much to tell," said Starkweather, with a helpless gesture. "What's selling these days?" "Just about everything." "Is there any particular color that's popular?" "No, they're all good." "I see you have some modern stuff over there." "We have a little of everything." Quillerin's interviewing technique was not working. "What do you call that thing?" he asked, pointing to a tall secretary desk with bulbous base and an inlaid design of exotic birds and flowers. "It's a desk," said Starkweather. Then his expressionless face brightened a fraction of a degree. "Here comes Mr. Like." From behind the oriental screen came a good-looking man in his early 30s. He had his arm around an elaborately hatted middle-aged woman who was smiling and blushing with pleasure. Like was saying in a deep, chesty voice, "You go home, dear, and tell the old man you've got to have that 12-foot sofa. It won't cost him a cent more than the last car he bought. And remember, dear, I want you to invite me to dinner the next time you're having that superb chocolate cake. Don't let your cook bake it. I want you to bake it yourself. For David." While he talked, David Like was walking the woman rapidly toward the front door, where he stopped and kissed her temple. Then he said a beautifully timed goodbye, meaningful but not lingering. When he turned toward Quillerin, he recomposed his face abruptly from an expression of rapture to one of businesslike aplomb. But he could not change his eyes. He had brooding eyes with heavy lids and long lashes. Even more striking was his hair, snow white and somewhat sensational with his young sun-tanned face. "I'm David Like," he growled pleasantly, extending a cordial hand. His eyes flickered downward for only a second, but Quillerin felt they had appraised his plaid tie and the width of his lapel. "Come into my office and we'll talk." The newsman followed him into a room that had deep gray walls. A leopard rug sprawled on the polished ebony floor. Lounge chairs, square and bulky and masculine, were covered in fabric with the texture of popcorn. On the back wall was a painting of a nude figure, her skin tones a luminous blue-gray, like steel. Quillerin found himself nodding in approval. "Nice office." "Glad you like it," the decorator said. "Don't you think gray is terribly civilized? I call this shade poppy seed. The chairs are sort of dried fig." I'm sick to death of pablum beige and mother's milk white. He reached for a decanter. How about a splash of cognac? Quillerin declined. He said he would rather smoke his pipe. Then he stated his mission, and Like said in his rumbling voice, I wish you hadn't called your magazine Gracious Abodes. It gives me visions of lavender gloves and peshmerga. What kind of decorating do you do? The newsman asked. All kinds. If people want to live like conquistadors or English barons or little French kings, we don't fight it. If you can find an important house for us to photograph, we'll put it on the cover of our first issue. We like the publicity, said the decorator, but I don't know how our clients will react. You know how it is. Whenever the boys in Washington find out a taxpayer has wall-to-wall carpet in his bathroom, they audit his tax returns for the last 3 years. He was flipping through a card index. I have a magnificent Georgian colonial job done in champagne and cranberry, but the lamps haven't arrived. And here's an Edwardian townhouse in Benedictine and plum, but there's been a delay in the draperies. The fabric manufacturer discontinued the pattern. Could the photographer shoot from an angle that would avoid the missing drapes? Like looked startled, but he recovered quickly and shook his head. No, you'd have to include the windows. He browsed through the file and suddenly seized an index card. Here's a house I'd like to see you publish. Do you know G. Vernon Tate? I did his house in French Empire with built-in vitrines for his jade collection. Who is this Tate? Quillerin asked. I'm new in this city. You don't know the Tates? They're one of the old families living in pseudo-castles down in Muggy Swamp. You know Muggy Swamp, of course. Very exclusive. The decorator made a rueful face. Unfortunately, the clients with the longest pedigrees are the slowest to pay their bills. Are the Tates very social? They used to be, but they live quietly now. Mrs. Tate is unwell, as they say in Muggy Swamp. Do you think they'd let us photograph? People with old money always avoid publicity on their real estate, Like said. But in this case, I might be able to use a little persuasion. Other possibilities were discussed, but both the decorator and newsman agreed the Tate house would be perfect. Important name, spectacular decor, brilliant color, and a jade collection to add interest. Besides that, said Like with a smug smile, it's the only job I've succeeded in getting away from the Sorbonne studio. It would give me a lot of satisfaction to see the Tate house on the cover of Gracious Abodes. If you succeed in lining it up, call me immediately, Quillerin said. We're working against time on the first issue. I'll give you my home phone. He wrote his number on a Daily Fluxion card and stood up to leave. David Like gave him a parting handshake that was hearty and sincere. Good luck with your magazine. And may I give you some fatherly advice? Quillerin eyed the younger man anxiously. Never, said Like with an engaging smile. Never call draperies drapes. Quillerin returned to his office, pondering the complexities of his new beat, and thinking fondly of lunch and the familiar drabness of the press club, where the wall color was sirloin, medium rare. On his desk, there was a message to call Fran Unger. He dialed her number reluctantly. I've been working on our project, said the women's editor, and I have some leads for you. Have you got a pencil ready? First, there's a Greek Revival farmhouse converted into a Japanese tea house, and then there's a penthouse apartment with carpet on the walls and ceiling, and an aquarium under the glass floor. And I know where there's an exciting master bedroom done entirely in 3 shades of black, except for the bed, which is brass. That should be enough to fill the first issue. Quillerin felt his mustache bristling. Well, thanks. But I've got all the material I need for the first book, he said, aware that it was a rash lie. Really? For a beginner, you're a fast worker. What have you lined up? It's a long, involved story, Quillerin said vaguely. I'd love to hear it. Are you going to the press club for lunch? No, he said with hesitation. As a matter of fact, I'm having lunch with a decorator at a private club. Fran Unger was a good newspaper woman, and not easy to put down. In that case, why don't we meet for drinks at the press club at 5:30? I'm sorry, Quillerin said in his politest voice, but I've got an early dinner date uptown. At 5:30, he fled to the sanctuary of his apartment, carrying a chunk of liver sausage and 2 onion rolls for his dinner. He would have preferred the press club. He liked the dingy atmosphere of the club, and the size of the stakes, and the company of fellow newsmen, but for the last 2 weeks, he had been driven to avoiding his favorite haunt. The trouble had started when he danced with Fran Unger at the photographer's ball. Apparently there was some magic in Quillerin's vintage foxtrot that gave her aspirations. She had been pursuing him ever since. I can't get rid of that woman, he told Coco, as he sliced the liver sausage. She's not bad looking, but she isn't my type. I've had all the bossy females I want. Besides, I like zebra fur on zebras. He cut some morsels of the sausage as an appetizer for Coco, but the cat was busy snapping his jaws at a thin skein of spiderweb that stretched between 2 chair legs. Only when the telephone rang a moment later did Coco pay attention. Lately, he had shown signs of jealousy toward the phone. Whenever Quillerin talked into the instrument, Coco untied his shoelaces or bit the telephone cord. Sometimes he jumped on the desk and tried to nudge the receiver away from Quillerin's ear. The telephone rang, and the newsman said to the mouthpiece, "Hello?" "Yes, what's the good news?" Immediately, Coco jumped to the desktop and started making himself a pest. Quillerin pushed him away. "Great! How soon can we take pictures?" Coco was pacing back and forth on the desk, looking for further mischief. Somehow, he got his leg tangled in the cord and howled in indignation. "Sorry, I can't hear you," said Quillerin. "The cat's raising the roof." "No, I'm not beating him. Hold the line." He extricated Coco and chased him away, then wrote down the address that David Light gave him. "See you Monday morning in Muggy Swamp," Quillerin said. "And thanks. This is a big help." The telephone rang once more that evening, and the friendly voice of Fran Unger came on the wire. "Well, hello, you're home." "Yes," said Quillerin. "I'm home." He was keeping an eye on Coco, who had leaped up on the desk. "I thought you had a big date tonight." "Got home earlier than I expected." "I'm at the press club," said the sugary voice. "Why don't you come over? We're all here, drinking up a storm." "Scram!" said Quillerin to Coco, who was trying to dial the phone with his nose. "What did you say?" "I was talking to the cat." Quillerin gave Coco a push, but the cat slanted his eyes and stood his ground, looking determined as he devised his next move. "By the way," the wheedling voice was saying, "when are you going to invite me up to meet Coco?" "Yow!" said Coco, aiming his deafening howl directly into Quillerin's right ear. "Shut up!" said Quillerin. "What?" "Oh, heck!" he said, as Coco pushed an ashtray full of pipe ashes to the floor. "Well," Fran Unger's voice became suddenly tart, "your hospitality overwhelms me." "Listen, Fran," said Quillerin, "I've got a mess on my hands right now." He was going to explain, but there was a click in his ear. "Hello?" he said. A dead silence was his answer, and then a dial tone. The connection had been cut. Coco was standing with one foot planted firmly on the plunger button.